All right, so I want to take 10 minutes and go a little more in depth into the X-29 and this fascinating, beautiful, odd, amazing airplane. It's not as obvious what's amazing about the airplane as it is for some others. It's not the biggest thing that ever flew. It's not the smallest or the fastest. It didn't end up being a fighter jet or anything like that. What it's done, I think, is really underappreciated, partially because all people see are those forward swept wings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a quick show. Apologies to the students here because you've seen me do this. I promise I won't swear as much as I usually do, or at all. I'll try. And what I want to do is give you a very quick introduction to this airplane. Well, the obvious technology is a forward swept wing, right? So let's talk about the forward swept wing and truly understand or get a better feel for why a forward swept wing. Why would we spend so much money to test this technology? Well, a forward swept wing is not a new thing. Anybody here grow up loving dinosaurs? Well, the first thing that we know of that had forward swept wings was a pterodactyl. And I'm going to show you a little video produced by some scientists. A little bit of it is, I think of it as nightmare fuel because it depicts this Hatzegopteryx. There's something I love saying, Hatzegopteryx. This thing as big as a giraffe, and what it might have looked like 71 million years ago. You know what I mean? Nightmare fuel. Look at the size of that neck and that head. How can this thing fly? Well, you're about to see. And we know these things flew. Undoubtedly with some effort. But watching the stroke of the wings, when it goes into the glide, look what you see. Forward swept wings. How in the world did an ancient dinosaur end up with forward swept wings? Well, think of the size of that head. If the wing is too far back, it'll tip over because the thing holding the dinosaur up is its wings. Big old head, wings not forward, but at the same time, the wings can't be far up on the body, so they had to be angled forward. That's one reason to have forward swept wings. It helps you handle an airplane that has a very heavy front end and no room for wings at the front end of the airplane. Now, some 71 million years later, Russian, Viktor Belyaev, I apologize for screwing that up, but not really, created a series of forward swept wing gliders. And in these airplanes, it definitely had a forward swept wing to handle problems with the center of gravity, problems with the balance of the wing, so much like that pterodactyl. Now, they only built a few of these things. They weren't particularly successful, although it was a good glider. But here's one in flight. This is a very large-scale radio control model. I included some video on this of the airplane coming in for a landing. Beautiful gold wings, very short thing, almost a flying wing. Then you can see how big that thing is. It has about a 25-foot wingspan. Just a gorgeous thing. That's being flown by a Swiss. I'm going to call him an artisan because he deserves the title. Now, of course, the Nazis in the waning years of the Second World War, desperate for war-winning technology, were also experimenting with things. So they built the Junkers Ju-287. It's a fascinating airplane, forward swept wings. Notice it's got 4 jet engines, but also it has rocket engines. That's the kind of pods under the jets. And those rockets are there because these are very new jet engines. They weren't very powerful, and this is a very heavy airplane. This was not a successful airplane. It did fly, but it did not fly well. And in the end, we were just kicking their butts, so they didn't have the ability to finish it. 20 years later, they gave it another shot. So this is that Hansa jet. BizJet, it wasn't very successful. They built about 40 of these things before they closed down production line. It had a bit of a life as a kind of a BizJet for the German Air Force, but you can see it's got the forward swept wings. These are the main examples of significantly forward swept wing jets out there. So why? Why forward swept wings? Well, as Ken said, payload. Look at that bomber. Where are all the bombs? They're up near the nose. And then look at the seating in that Hansa jet. Notice that there's no center island there. It's all a flat floor. As he said, a 6-footer could stand up inside that cabin. If you look carefully under the third row of seats, you'll see they're sitting on what looks like a box. That box contains the center wing spar for the airplane. Normally, that would be where the seats are. You'd have to climb over it or something else. So this created a lovely experience for the passengers, but unfortunately, forward swept wings are very difficult. They have to be heavy for structural reasons. So, for payload. Well, there's another reason. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance here. I'm going to try to to talk about stalls in a way that is obvious for even the lawyers in the audience. So I'm sorry if you're a lawyer, but I had to do that. I'm going to show you a little video here. It's a really fascinating little program where you can see the streamlines of air going around a wing. And this is a wing that's not producing any lift. And as I run it, you'll see the air going by, and then you'll see it go to an angle of attack. The angle of attack is the angle at which the air is hitting the wings. Now, one of the reasons I'm using these words is because when we get the pilots up here, they're going to say things like angle of attack. And so now you'll know what angle of attack is. So let's watch this wing as it flows through the air. And then we raise the angle of attack, and it produces a big pressure distribution. But notice how that air flowing over the wing, it stays attached. It's very smooth. There's no eddies, right? It's not producing much drag, but it's producing a lot of lift. That's great. That's the miracle of wings. You know, a really good wing, you can get 30 or 40 times the amount of lift than you get from drag. That's amazing. Now, what happens if we ask too much of the wing? So we bump it up just a little bit, and look at the top of the wing. The air can't stay attached. It separates, and you get turbulent flow. Now only half of the wing is producing lift. You have stability problems, you have enormous drag, the wing stops working in any real useful sense. So what does this have to do with forward swept wings? Well, here's a wing that's identical except for one thing. The one on the left is pointing end forward, right? It's backwards. That's the X-29 wing. The one on your right is a traditional wing, a wing that's swept aft. If I increase the angle of attack, a very interesting thing happens. That separated flow moves from the furthest point aft forward. Why is this important? Because with a forward swept wing, that's where the ailerons are. So you have good flow for the ailerons, and you can maneuver even though a big part of your wing is stalled. Whereas a conventional wing, you have to do all sorts of things to keep that aileron effective. So that makes the wing suitable, or most suitable, for a high angle attack. All this led to, let's build this airplane. But, as Ken said, there were big problems. One problem was a structural problem. And this video, I'm pretty sure it was from very early in the X-29 program. They're just trying to show the issues. But if you look at this, you can see how the wings are twisting up like this. And you can kind of imagine it. If I've got something out the wind like this, it's going to want to twist up, right? Well, that gets rid of all the advantages of having forward swept wing, and it creates other problems. Not only can it break the wing off, but even if it doesn't break the wing off, it can cause flutter. Anybody here ever seen a stop sign or something fluttering in the wind? You're in the Antelope Valley. You've seen a stop sign fluttering in the wind. Let me show you what happens when airplanes flutter in the wind. Now, these are all wind tunnel models. Fortunately, I wasn't going to use flutter video from real airplanes, but these are all videos from the wind tunnel, and this is all caused by flutter, it's called aeroelastic instability, and it can be bad. Tore the wing off an F-111 model. How'd you like to be in that 747, right? Yeah, airplanes, you put a lot of thought into building and testing airplanes. This doesn't happen. This is what it looks like in a real airplane. Now, these are radio control airplanes, so nobody was harmed except for the pride of the designer. But this stuff can be catastrophic, right? So if you're going to put forward swept wings on an airplane, you've got to figure out a way to do it. And that was one of the main points for the X-29. So getting that stiffness, getting the wings set up so that when it did bend under load, it wouldn't do this. That was a major part of the program, is finding a way to do that with composites. The second thing, now you know I have a knife. So as I hold this knife here, this is a stable configuration. All right, if I poke at the knife comes back to the center, right? It likes to be there, it's stable. What happens if I do this? All right, it's unstable. And even a circus performer would have a very difficult time stabilizing this. If you want to try it, grab a knife and try this. You don't have plates, so you won't break anything. Try holding a knife like this, and this is important because we're going to try to turn you into X-29 control systems. You try it. Yeah, I knew knives would be falling. Here, let me go. See, it happened to me too. It's very, very difficult. It's actually physically impossible. Guess how unstable the X-29 was? It was this unstable. There are no pilots on the planet, there are no human beings that have the ability to stabilize an airplane that unstable. It would go from straight flight to out of control or broken in a matter of about a quarter second. It was extremely unstable. So the problem was they built this airplane that was extremely unstable and had to find a way to make it stable so the pilot didn't have to. And if they failed, they would lose the airplane and they might lose the pilot. Now you know why Ken was so anxious on the first flight of the airplane. Suspect we'll talk about that more when we get the pilots up here. So we also, another thing that the problem to solve was, now that you've got the ability to fly at a higher angle of attack, thanks to the forward-swept wings, what can you do there? How do you control the airplane? So those are, to me, kind of the big three things about the airplane. So what about the legacy? Well, how about airplanes nowadays? Fighter jets that have swept forward wings. Well, the Russians tried it. The Soviets is the airplane on the right. That's a Su-47. It's hard to remember because they only built one. It flew at air shows for a while, and eventually they just put it in their version of museum, which is basically park it outside until it rots. Interestingly, that airplane on the right, it has the same control effectors that the X-29 has, which is fascinating. So they were paying attention. The one on the left was a trainer. The Russians built that in 2017. They built a couple. Nobody's interested, not even the Russians, to buy it. So really nothing came of either airplane, although they were very cool to look at. So what really did we get out of the X-29? That airplane is a 787, a picture of a 787. Everything on the airplane that's blue is composite structure, tailored specifically for what it needed to do, which is what the X-29 did first in an airplane and at very large scale. So the legacy of the X-29 lives on in all modern, let's say expensive and military aircraft. I mean, it's amazing. You look at that picture and only, I think the green and red are metal, right? So when you're sitting in a 787, which many of you have or will do, you're sitting in a big carbon tube. And you can think of the X-29 when you do that. On the upper left, most high-end bicycle frames nowadays are built from laid-up composites, and they are tailored specifically for a certain field of maneuverability. That was really started and really applied first in the X-29. Anybody here F1 fans? Yeah, I mean, F1 is amazing. It's probably the richest sport in the world. It's insane. That car, a modern F1 racing car, everything that can be made out of laid-up carbon is made out of laid-up carbon, because that stuff is so darn good. It solved the problem of the X-29. More importantly, they solved a lot of problems with that technology, and now it's being used all over the world. The digital flight control system. Now, the X-29 by far was the most unstable aircraft I'm aware of, but digital flight controls gave us things, the ability to do things we never imagined. Here's the F-35B. This is one of the easiest airplanes to fly on the planet. Anybody in this room with about 3 minutes of training in a simulator, I could teach you to land the airplane on an aircraft carrier. I could teach you to hover this thing. It is very, very easy. It's all because computers are very, very busy making the airplane do what you ask and stabilizing the airplane. You can see that tail's wagging. The pilot's at an air show. He's just keeping the wings level, but every little motion he makes on the stick, the airplane is doing whatever it takes to give the pilot what he wants. Here's the airplane in hover. This is impossible without a digital flight control system, something the X-29 was critical in developing. And of course, high alpha, you can't talk high alpha without showing the Raptor. The things that were learned about controlling an airplane in high AOA, that was the start of many research projects. The X-31, the Vista MATV, the Harv airplane, all of that stuff led into airplanes like the Raptor. So we see the forward-swept wings. We see the forward-swept wings. What we're missing is the real story, which is making those darn things work created an unbelievable amount of technology. So the airplane, they like to call it the junkyard dog, and to kind of give you a very nicely produced thing, but this, by the way, is a video that was produced by the Flight Test Historical Foundation. They've got a channel on YouTube. It's called the Flight Test Museum channel. We're going to play this video so you can see a little short snippet, public-facing side about the X-29.
Designed around a forward-swept wing and assembled with the nose from an F-5, F-16 landing gear, and an engine from an F-18, the team from Grumman, NASA, DARPA, and the Air Force affectionately referred to the X-29 as the junkyard dog. With novel control surfaces, a top speed of Mach 1.8, and a flight computer that made 40 corrections every second, the X-29 personified the adage, turn and burn. Taking to the skies in 1984, the capability demonstrator introduced revolutionary technologies and became the first forward-swept wing aircraft to break the sound barrier. When the junkyard dog was put back on its leash in 1991, the evolutionary X-plane had shattered the analog world and ushered in the digital age of aviation. The heroes, the hardware, the history. The Flight Test Museum, where the sky has never been the limit.